My great pleasure this afternoon to introduce Dr. Marty Klein. Dr. Marty Klein. Thank you. Dr. Marty Klein is a licensed psychotherapist for 33 years, certified sex therapist, and international lecturer in sexuality and public policy. Some of you may remember last year at our conference, he gave a talk on public policy and sexuality. He has been an expert witness or an invited plaintiff in many important state and federal obscenity and anti-censorship cases. His landmark book, America's War on Sex, with a foreword by the ACLU's Nadine Strawson, was honored as Book of the Year by ASIC, and has been since released in an updated second edition. This book is for sale. You can purchase a copy, as well as his other book, Sexual Intelligence. A personal friend of mine, and someone that I hope you don't mind that I share. I've had a couple of sessions of great oral pleasure with him. We've talked. And now, Dr. Marty Klein.
Thank you. Now we know that Raul talks and tells. So, okay. How nice to see you again. It's only 12 months since I was last up here talking about sex and humanism and public policy, and the year has flown by. And a lot of great things have happened in the association. This is a reminder to turn down your cell phone or vibrator or whatever you've got. Only for the next 75 minutes. I want to talk to you about sexuality today, and you don't need to copy down feverishly every slide you're going to see. If you want to get the slides after the talk, just go to my website. They're posted there. My website, sexed.org. Just go to /slide/AHA, and the slides are there, and you can enjoy them at your leisure for your dining and dancing pleasure. So why do we need to better understand sex? Well, people are scared about sex, and therefore they're superstitious. And people say that we need religion to have a sexual morality. And people say that and people are using, as I documented in my book, America's War on Sex, people are using the issue of sexual regulation to actively and very meticulously undermine secular democracy. So those are three really important reasons that we need to understand sex better, and I want to give you some tools today so that you can talk about sexuality in the public arena. There's also a couple of other reasons that we want to understand sex better. It's a great subject when you're at a cocktail party, and sexually, most of us can use a little help. So it's okay that you're here for the public policy stuff. If you take away a little personal stuff, that's okay with me. So it's good for the movement, and it's good for us. And that's why I'm always delighted to see something about sexuality on a humanist agenda, even if I'm the one who's doing it. So 10 things that humanists need to know about sex. Get ready. 10 things. Number 1, all sexuality is constructed. There is no inherent meaning in sexuality. And what that means is that questions like, what is sex? Is S&M actual sex? Is kissing sex? And everybody's thinking about Bill Clinton, so I'll say it. Is oral sex sex? Now, some people say, well, that depends on who's doing the oral sex, but we don't want to get into that much fine detail. So questions like, what is sex? What is sexy? What's an orgasm even? It's not simply a biological question, and these questions don't have right answers. These questions have answers that are right for a particular person at a particular time in their life history. Who's eligible for sexual activity and sexual pleasure? Even that question is constructed. And if you travel around the world, you see the answers to these questions are different in different places. And if you stay right here in California or in your own hometown, the answers to these questions are different over the last 150 years. We used to have categories about sexuality that have been discredited. Nymphomania, just 40 years ago, nymphomania, very important clinical category. I always think nymphomania, that's a woman who wants sex one more time than her partner does. So So we all have narratives about sexuality. We all have stories about our bodies and how our bodies function. Some people describe themselves, I'm a premature ejaculator. I think that everybody likes to have a mature ejaculation. People describe themselves as having ED, what used to be called impotence, now called erectile dysfunction. I don't like the expression erectile dysfunction. My testicles shrivel up, so I don't like that word. So whatever stories people tell about sexuality, whether they're religious people, whether they're secular people, whether they're young or old or in a couple or single, people tell stories about their sexuality to explain it to themselves, to communicate with other people. And it's very important to know that these stories that we tell, they're constructed, they're subjective, and everybody's got those stories. Now, if you talk to some religious people, they'll tell you, oh no, this is not a story that we tell, this is how sex really is. Sex is sacred, or sex is for a man and a woman. Now, it's okay to have stories about sex. Hopefully what we're doing is we're acknowledging that our stories are stories. And that's what makes our stories better than other stories, the fact that we acknowledge that they're stories. Thank you. Sex has no meaning, no intrinsic meaning. People want it to have meaning. People want sexuality to have meaning. Because without meaning, without intrinsic meaning, it means that people have to construct the meaning of their own sexual activities on their own. What values are we going to use to do that? What guidelines will we use to do that? People have to construct stories about what does it mean when I have an orgasm? What does it mean when I don't have an orgasm? What does it mean when I don't desire my wife of 25 years? People have to come up with stories about that. Now, there are people who will tell you that there is intrinsic meaning. If a man does not want to have sex with his wife after 25 years, it means he's a pig. Or it means that he doesn't love her. If you ask me, what does it mean when a man doesn't want to have sex with his wife after 25 years? My answer is, I don't know. I would have to talk to the person. I would have to look at the situation. Without intrinsic meaning, if sex does not have this exceptionalism attached to it, then the decisions we make around sexuality, they're just like other decisions. And indeed, decisions about sexuality are just like the other decisions we make. And if you are clueless about how you make decisions about other parts of your life, you'll be clueless about how you make sexual decisions. If you have a strong sense of values, then you'll bring that strong sense of values to your sexual decision making. We don't need for sex to have a special meaning of its own that we, trembling, come up to it and look up to it and say, oh, I hope I can fit into that. No. We construct the meanings of sexuality. Religion, on the other hand, asserts that sexuality has intrinsic meaning. And that has very important implications for public policy and for mental health. Just look at the big fight now about the new DSM-5. For more on why sex has no meaning, I wrote an article for the Humanist Institute many years ago, and it's on my website. Feel free to take a look at that. Well, I've been in the doghouse ever since I tried to get my mother-in-law hanged as a witch. So you want to have a historical perspective on these things. Another thing humanists need to know about sex is that sexual problems are generally not about sex. Now, some clever person once said that everything in the world is about sex except sex, which is about power. So that's sort of the beginning of looking at sex in a different way. Sexual problems, I can tell you as a sex therapist for the last 33 years, sexual problems are generally not about sex. They're about practically everything else. They're about not wanting to acknowledge that we're getting old. They're about the lack of acceptance of our own bodies. They're about ignorance and misinformation. Some people think they have a sexual problem. Some women think they have a sexual problem because they don't climax from penis-vagina intercourse. Well, it turns out sometime around 1981, the clitoris was invented, and I remember this. And so most women, gay, straight, bi, trans, whatever, most women don't climax just from having something going in and out, in and out, in and out of their vagina. Because unlike in horseshoes, when it comes to sex, missing something by a little bit, really matters. If you're one of those women who climaxes from intercourse, you know who you are, that's okay. But a lot of women don't. And so a lot of women come into my office, even today in 2013, oh, there's something wrong with me, I don't come, can you fix me? Well, what activity is it that you don't climax from, I ask. And the answer is almost always the same. Oh, normal sex. Normal sex, real sex, the regular thing. So sometimes misinformation is at the heart of sexual problems. Sometimes it's about performance pressure. If you ask people, oh, so you don't get erections when you want them. That's my fancy term. That's my fancy clinical sophisticated term. People say, well, if you don't call it impotence and you don't call it ED, what do you call it? I say, well, what I call it is you don't get it up when you want to. And the important part of that definition is the second part. You don't get it up when you want to. Sometimes the when you want to part is the important part. And so some people have unrealistic expectations. They think they should be able to get an erection when they're drunk, which is not realistic. They think they should be able to get an erection with somebody they hate, which is not realistic. They think they should be able to get an erection with a Catholic, which is just not realistic. So when we talk about sexual function, when we talk about erections and lubrication and orgasm, sexual function is not the centerpiece of sexual enjoyment. It's just one part of it. Lots and lots and lots and lots of people have perfectly good plumbing, but they don't enjoy sex. Because plumbing is not what sex is about. There's people attached to the end of the plumbing, and that's what sex is about. It's about the connection between the people, and the plumbing comes along for the ride. In fact, too much focus on, gee, I hope I get it up, I hope I keep it up, I hope I don't come too fast, I hope I come at all, or I hope his hand doesn't get tired, I hope his jaw doesn't get tired, I hope I don't call out the wrong name during orgasm. That kind of focus can really get in the way of sexual pleasure and sexual satisfaction. So it's really important not to put too much attention on the plumbing, because the plumbing is only a small part of what goes on. And so I ask people when they come in and they have a problem, what's the problem? Why is not getting an erection a problem? Why is not getting wet a problem? And then people tell me these things. They say, well, when I don't get wet, I don't feel like a real woman. That's not a sex problem. Well, if I don't get it up, I'm afraid that my wife's going to leave me. That is definitely not a sexual problem. You've got a much bigger problem than that. Well, if I can't guarantee that I'm going to have an orgasm, I'm afraid that my partner is going to feel rejected. Oh, well, that's not a sex problem either. So there's a lot of things that people tell me about why their problem is a problem that reveals to me that they don't have the problem that they think they do. So don't blame sex. Don't blame sex. Every once in a while I have a patient, I think to myself, it's people like you who give sex a bad name. The third thing that humanists need to know about sex. Well, everyone makes assumptions about sex and love and intimacy and the connection between them. Everybody makes assumptions about that. Everybody makes assumptions about that. And our job in the public policy arena is not to persuade other people that our assumptions are better than theirs. But at least we can be aware that these are our assumptions. Assumptions like love is what drives sexual desire. That's a very common assumption. Assumptions like there are gay people and there are straight people, and there's a clear, bright line between them, and never the twain shall meet, I laugh when people talk about gay porn. Gay porn. There's no such thing as gay porn. Is that a controversial enough statement for you? There's no such thing as gay porn. There's porn that shows men having sex with men, and there's porn that shows women having sex with women. But lots of straight people watch that stuff. So how can you call it gay porn? It's like when my straight patients come in and they say, oh, I'm freaking out, I just had a gay fantasy. I say, are you straight? They say, yeah, I'm straight. That's why I'm upset. I say, well, if you're straight, you can't have a gay fantasy. Only gay people can have those. What, do you have gay envy now? So we need to know what our assumptions are. We need to share them with our partner. We need to talk about them explicitly. Henry, show the Robertsons that funny face you always make when you climax. See? I love the guy's pants. Everyone has good conditions for sex. Everyone has good conditions for sex. And those conditions differ from person to person, and those conditions can be different in a person's life as they go through the life cycle. So there are conditions about oneself, conditions about one's partner, conditions about one's situation. Now, there are people who have no conditions for sexual satisfaction. They can enjoy sex under any situation, no matter what. They're psychopaths. Everybody else, and that's most of the rest of us, everybody else has conditions. And when those conditions are met, then it's possible for us to have sexual satisfaction. When those conditions are not met, you can have the greatest erection in the world, or you could be with the most physically attractive person in the world, and it will be very difficult to enjoy sex. So, for example, for some people, personal hygiene is real important. For other people, not so much. And tonight at the cocktail party, you'll see who's who. So for some people, you know, personal hygiene is real important. And so they have this great day hiking or at the beach, and then they come back and their partner says, come on, let's have sex. And they feel very close to their partner, but they know, you know, if I have sex before I take a shower, I'm just not going to enjoy it. Now, wouldn't you know, some of those people, they say yes anyway. And they have sex when they need a shower, and they can't enjoy it. And they wonder, what's wrong with me? And the answer to what's wrong with me is, you had sex when you didn't have your conditions met. Some people need to be in love. Other people don't care. Some people need to be in love in order to enjoy sex. Now, that's okay, except when you ask some of these people, well, where do you meet partners with whom to have sex? They say, well, I go to a bar, and after 20 minutes and a couple of drinks, I just pick up the closest stranger and take them home. Now, there's nothing wrong with that unless you like to hear your own name during sex. You know, if you pick up a total stranger and have sex with them, you know, I don't have a moral thing against that. It's strictly practical. If you like to feel trusting and close and in love during sex, having sex with a stranger probably is not such a good idea. That's, again, the importance of knowing your conditions for good sex. And then there are conditions about my partner. You know, for some people, they want their partner to be communicative. Other people, they wish their partner would just shut up. Some people want their partner to be dominant or manly. Other people don't care. The environment, some people, they really, really, really want privacy. Some people are so phobic about having other people hear that they're having sex, you know, or see that they're having sex. You know, they only want to have sex during a solar eclipse. So nobody on Earth can see them, or in this half of the Earth. Some people want an environment that's romantic, or what they think of as sexy. Other people don't care. And it doesn't matter what your conditions are, as long as you can arrange to have them some of the time, and you're willing to acknowledge those to yourself. Some people say, oh, I know my conditions, but I shouldn't have them. And that kind of internal conflict can really make it difficult to relax, let your body do what it wants to do, and enjoy sex. So when people have sexual dissatisfaction, when people don't enjoy sex, when they don't have their conditions, that's not a dysfunction. So when people say things, when people feel things like, I don't feel close to you, or I'm afraid the kids can hear us, if those are the kinds of things that get in the way of a person relaxing and enjoying sex, that's not a dysfunction. That's not a dysfunction. You know, when I sit down to eat, I don't like to be confronted with a lot of violence. If I am, I don't enjoy my meal so much. That's not an eating dysfunction. So people who think they have no conditions, it's not realistic. It's just not realistic. No matter how much you love someone, if you don't have your conditions met, it's going to be hard to enjoy sex. So number 5, desire and arousal are different experiences. This is a real important thing that everybody in the whole world needs to really understand. Desire and arousal are different experiences. Now, he says, don't look at me. You're the one who told them to make themselves at home. Now, this is about arousal and desire, right? Somebody has desire here, and somebody has arousal, and somebody is saying, I don't get it. Desire is a mental state. Arousal is a physical state. Two separate things. And many of us have had desire, but we didn't have arousal. Many of us have become aroused with people we didn't really love. Some of us become aroused with people we don't even like. Desire is a mental state. Desire is a kind of a hunger or a kind of attraction. Desire is a wanting. Arousal is what goes on in your body. Arousal is what goes on in your body. And I work with a lot of people who don't necessarily know the difference, or I work with a lot of people that when I ask them a question that a lot of therapists don't ask, which is, well, were you excited during the sex the other night? A lot of people say, well, I had an erection, I guess so. I guess so. So it's important to be able to feel one's body during sex. And we need to ask our partner about what makes them excited. And then we can know if our partner is excited or not. You can't tell just by looking at someone if they desire us. Sometimes you can't tell just by looking at them if they're aroused. So erection, that's a matter of arousal. That's not a matter of desire. You can take Viagra and get an erection, but you still won't necessarily have desire. Viagra is not an aphrodisiac. Viagra doesn't work on desire. Viagra works on arousal. So if you're trying to have sex with somebody and you can't stand them and you take Viagra, you might get an erection, but you still can't stand them. That's not a very good way to start a sexual encounter, right? Lubrication, same thing. I'm talking about women in here, not cars. Lubrication, that's arousal. Again, that's not desire. And sometimes women get aroused, but they don't like the person. And so they don't have desire to have sex with them, but they're wet. It's possible to get wet and to not want to have sex with that person, or not want to have sex with that person right now. And one of the big myths that we need to confront, the myth that fantasy is an accurate reflection of desire. The idea that fantasy is a reflection of desire. Some fantasy is. Some fantasy is. You know, you might have a sexual fantasy about, the president of AHA. Or you might have a sexual fantasy about, a big shot speaker at a conference. Who knows? Some of our fantasies are indeed a reflection of our true desire. On the other hand, lots of people have fantasies that do not reflect their actual desires. You might have a fantasy about taking on the Green Bay Packers. You know, you might have a fantasy about sex with a relative or sex with a neighbor. You might have a fantasy about being sexually coerced. That doesn't necessarily reflect actual desire. Fantasy is the opportunity to have sex with no consequences, right? You know, if you say to your husband, how about if the next time we have sex we include your best friend? You know, that would have consequences in the real world. You know, but if you say to your husband, how about sex with your best friend? No, okay, never mind. You know, that's not going to go away. The next day you come downstairs, good morning, your husband says, excuse me, I'm not done with that conversation from last night. On the other hand, you could have a fantasy about it, nobody gets hurt. Why have outrageous fantasies? Why have outlandish fantasies? Why have fantasies about stuff that we would never do in a million years? Well, if you could have sex with your husband, why bother to fantasize about it? You got the real thing. So, of course, the most common sexual fantasies involve inappropriate partners and activities that we wouldn't do in a million years. Very common, very common. This is the frontier of my computer knowledge, so I just want you to appreciate. It only took me 100,000 hours to create this. Has nothing to do with what we're talking about. I just want you to admire it. No, this is just a very simple drawing that says that when we perceive a sexual stimulus, it goes down the spinal column. The message triggers cardiovascular activity in the pelvis, and eventually we get erect or we lubricate or something like that. And the spinal column also carries messages of anxiety and danger and self-consciousness and all of that. So you could have the greatest erection in the world and you could be with somebody you really like or you really like their body and you're really excited and your pelvis is really chugging along and everything's great. And then if you hear You know the worst thing you can possibly hear from a woman when you have sex with her, which is, oh my God, I think I hear my husband coming. You know, that message gets transmitted down the same spinal column as, oh wow, I'm having a real good time. And so what happens is the blood drains out of your penis, if you're a man, the blood drains out of your penis because your body needs all that blood to propel you out the window. So sexual dysfunction, you know, when our genitalia doesn't do what we want it to do, that's when the information going from the brain down to the pelvis and the cardiovascular system, that's when that information doesn't go smoothly. Because there's the interference of, oh my God, I think my husband's coming up the stairs. Or for that matter, gee, I wonder if I'm as good looking as her last boyfriend. Or gee, I wonder if I should have brushed my teeth before we had sex. Or whatever it is that's getting in the way. So what do people do to enhance arousal? Remember the difference between desire and arousal? Were you here 5 minutes ago? Yeah? So what do people typically do to enhance arousal? They pressure themselves, they fantasize about somebody else, they use a vibrator, they talk dirty to their partner, they try and get their partner excited because they think it'll excite them. So people have a lot of strategies for enhancing arousal. Whether they work or not, people typically have a lot of strategies when they're in bed. You know, imagine that you're with somebody else, Barbara Stanwyck, you know, whatever. So people have a lot of strategies to enhance their arousal. But what about enhancing desire? Oh, that's a totally different thing. That's the holy grail of sex therapy and of Western civilization. How do you enhance desire, whether in yourself or in somebody else? That's the tricky part, enhancing desire. We don't have any drugs. I mean, other than a Mercedes, we don't have any drugs to enhance desire. We have drugs that can help reduce inhibition a little bit, like alcohol, recreational drugs, and ibuprofen, you know, things like that. So we have drugs that can reduce inhibition, but that's not the same thing as inflaming desire. And this is where people get stuck. And without strategies, what people typically do is they mostly encourage the other person, if you were sexier, I would have more desire. So there's other things, if we go backwards, these arousal things, people mostly operate on themselves to enhance their arousal. When it comes to desire, though, people don't know what to do. They say, well, if you were sexier, I'd have more desire. And of course, there's nothing quite so wonderful as being told you're not sexy enough. So that typically doesn't work very well. So what's the takeaway here? Don't confuse fantasy with desire. And now let's get political for a second. What is it, ultimately, what is it that the religious right wants to control? They want to control, they want to suppress people deliberately inflaming their own passion. You know, the idea that people would voluntarily masturbate and get themselves excited, church doesn't like that. The idea that people would use pornography to get themselves excited, church doesn't like that. The idea that people would dress in a skimpy way or play the pirate game or whatever it is, church doesn't like that. So the question of when is it okay to deliberately inflame your own passion, that's a very big political issue, in addition to being a psychological or spiritual issue. So speaking of religion, number 6 of the 10 things humanists need to know about sex. Religion's attitude about sex is complex. It's not so simple as don't do it. It's a lot more complicated than that. We'll be single again in heaven, right? If you're Mormon, you get extra credit here. So if religion's position about sexuality is more complicated than don't do it, then what exactly is up with religion and sexuality? Most religions. If you worship the tree god, this probably doesn't apply to you. But when you look at mainstream religion, they're afraid that people are going to engage in sexual activity that offends God. And I think a certain amount of the positioning that religious people take about sex, I think a lot of those people are actually sincere. I think they really believe that there's, some old guy with a lot of video monitors, and where you put your finger during sex is on monitor number 17, and God's actually watching where you put your finger. And if you put it in the right hole, God says no problem. If you put it in the wrong hole, God says, oh, this is no good. Send some hail down to Topeka because somebody put their finger in the wrong hole. So some people are really sincere about this. They're sincere that certain kinds of sexual activity offends God. They don't understand that all sex is the same, and that the only way to evaluate sex is through people's values, not through people's behavior. We'll talk about that more in a second. Some religious people, they feel that sexuality is a divine gift if you do it the right way, and if you do it the wrong way, you're going to miss the divine gift. Kind of like life is an Abercrombie and Fitch catalog, and if you're on the wrong page, you're just not going to get, those perfect genes. Some religious people fear that people are going to get out of control. There's a certain amount of data to support this. Some people, they have sex and they think, oh, sex, now I get it. I want more of that. Sorry, don't have time to go to church right now. I'll catch you next week. So some people are concerned that sexuality is going to be a vehicle through which people get out of control, or a vehicle through which people have too much contact with their own bodies, which according to a lot of mainstream religion is sort of a dirty, nasty bag of bones. During orgasm, nobody ever feels fat. During orgasm, nobody is saying, gee, I wish I had more hair. The Italians, they say, it sounds better in Italian, but I don't speak Italian. I eat Italian, but I don't speak Italian. The Italians say bed is the poor man's opera. I love that. Bed is the poor man's opera. And during an enjoyable sexual experience, whether it's with yourself or with somebody else, our bodies are perfect. Nobody feels, gee, I wish I would have trimmed my beard during an orgasm. I mean, your beard's just fine during an orgasm. Did you know that the French say that a kiss without a mustache is like soup without salt? Did you know that? And of course, mainstream religion is afraid that sexuality is going to destroy holy matrimony, which is kind of funny because out of the other side of their mouth, they say that sex is only legitimate within holy matrimony. So they sort of, want marriage to monopolize sex, and then they say, yeah, but not too much. So I think it's valuable for us in public policy terms to think of religion as regulating sexuality rather than preventing it. I think that will empower us from a political point of view to understand those folks better and to talk about the implications of regulating sexuality and to see their political activity more clearly. And a lot of mainstream religious people will tell you they think of sex as a divine gift. But that carries a lot of freight. Like imagine that your Aunt Martha comes back from India and brings you this incredibly beautiful shawl, right? It could happen. Brings you this incredibly beautiful shawl. And you look at it and you think, I live in San Diego. I don't need a shawl. But you know what I really need is a table runner. So you put this beautiful shawl on your dining room table, and it's gorgeous. It fits the decor of the room, and it's beautiful. It makes the room just come alive, and now you have a beautiful... And Aunt Martha says, wait. I didn't give you no stinking table runner. I gave you a shawl. You got to use it the way I want you to use it. You have an Aunt Martha, I could tell. So, Aunt Martha giveth, but Aunt Martha controlleth. Right? And that's how a lot of people think about God and sex. God giveth sex, but God say, you got to do it on my terms. And I think that's a helpful way for us to be thinking about religion and sex. Because religion defines what's authorized. who's eligible, and not only who's eligible, but what activities are considered legitimate, and what are good reasons to be sexual. So let me tell you for a second how I talk to my religious patients, because I do have religious patients. You know, after when they have sexual problems and then they wash out of pastoral counseling. There are some religious professionals in my community, and you know, they talk to me kind of like it's a clandestine lover. They say, "Listen, I have this patient. I'd like to send him to you, but you know, you don't have to tell anybody that I actually talked with you." So, but let me tell you about the concept that I use with some of my religious patients. Because they come in and they're freaking out because they prefer oral sex to intercourse, or because they fantasize, or they whatever. And I say, you know, now again, I'm talking now to a person in a faith tradition, not like us, or not like me. But I say, you know that sex is a divine gift, right? I mean, sex is proof that God loves you, and in your case, I get these, God really loves you. So. Sex is a divine gift. That's what some of my patients, they say, yeah, right. So now I have credibility, right? So here's the thing. God has given you this divine gift of your sexuality. And in fact, if you look in Genesis, if you look in the original, it says that God breathed life into Adam, right? So I say that breathing life into Adam, it's in the, you know, some people think the Bible is written in English. But in the original Aramaic, it said God breathed life into Adam. I say to my religious patients, well, you know, that breath of life, that's your sexuality. Hey, so God says, hey, I'm going to breathe this sexuality into you. It's a nice gift. Did I get a thank you card? What? So I'm going to give you this gift, and here's what you have to do in return. I'm going to also give you a brain, God says. The God we don't believe in says. I'm going to also give you a brain. And I want you to administer, I want you to use this brain to administer this divine gift that I'm giving you. Kind of like your Aunt Martha, right? I want you to administer this divine gift in a godly way. And God says, now here's the thing. That godly way is going to be different for different people. That's why I gave you a brain. So look, I want you to administer your divine sexuality in a godly way, and then, you know, everything will be okay. Now, some people think that there's one set of rules for administering your sexuality in a godly way, and it's in that book. What do you call it? The Bible, right? So, but here's the thing. Some people think that the only kind of godly sex is heterosexual, penis-vagina intercourse within marriage. But we all know, and maybe you've even had the experience yourself, we all know people who have heterosexual, penis-vagina, monogamous, marital sex, and it is not godly. It's filled with physical pain or humiliation or manipulation, or it's just a waste of time. So I think what God has in mind, I say to my religious patients, I think what God has in mind is, you got to figure out what does godly sex mean for you. And God gave you a brain, go use it, go have godly sex, and you know, everything will be fine. And my religious patients, they love that. It gives them a way to think about the reality that everybody has to administer their own sexuality in a way that fits with their values. What matters in sex is not where you put your finger. What matters in sex is where you put your heart. What matters in sex is how you express yourself. And it doesn't mean you have to be in love. It doesn't mean you even have to know the name of the person you're with or the people you're with. But it means that you have to know what your values are. And just like everything else that we do, we want people to act in accordance with their values if their values are wholesome. So, you know, there's a way in which the religious right, they take sex way more seriously than we do. They talk about it all the time. I mean, they're obsessed with it, right? You know, I want to talk about baseball. They want to talk about sex, right? The religious right is obsessed with sexuality, and we need, as I said last year in my public policy talk, we need to talk about sex a little bit more too. We need to talk about public policy with relation to sexuality. We need to talk about why it's an issue in a democratic society that some people are given legal privileges because the government approves of who they marry. That's a political issue. That's a political issue. And there are lots of political issues about sex education, for example, or about whether or not you're allowed to masturbate when you're in jail. Yes, yes. There are jails in the United States where if you're caught masturbating, you get punished. So there's a lot of political issues around sexuality. So number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 of things humanists need to know about sex. Pornography. Oh, everyone's favorite subject, pornography. Is there anybody here who has not heard of pornography? Just raise your hand. So let me start with the good news. Pornography use in most people does not lead to violence, addiction, or the use of child pornography. It's not a gateway drug, and it doesn't grab people out of perfectly happy, healthy sexual relationships, throw them to the ground and say, okay, you're with me now. Pornography doesn't do that. But here are some common concerns about pornography, not just concerns of people on the religious right, but many people in this room. I mean, these are legitimate concerns. What if these things were true? What if pornography encouraged people to have curiosity about various kinds of sexuality? What if pornography did lead teenagers to have sex before they were ready? What if pornography did encourage perversion? What if pornography did lead to pornography addiction? You know, these are legitimate questions. Now, there's good news about every single one of these things, except for the last one, because pornography does encourage masturbation, and that's not a bad thing anyway. But unless you're doing it, you know, while I'm trying to talk. So, you in the fifth row, you know who you are. So these are common concerns about pornography. Now, let me tell you, I hear so much about violent pornography, almost as if it's one word, like in German, you know, violent pornography. Let me tell you about the content of internet pornography. And there's a lot of pornography on the internet. How many people have heard of the internet? Maybe we should start with that. I don't know, internet, fad or here to stay? What do you think? Jury's still out, right? The content of internet pornography. Some troubling stuff and a lot of not so troubling stuff. There's troubling stuff on the internet. Now, if you ever go to a stadium to watch a ball game, like you know, a baseball game, football game, there's 40,000 people in the stadium, which is why I never go to the stadium. 40,000 people. You know, among those 40,000 people, there's going to be some nice people and some neutral people, and then there'll be a couple of like really bad people. When you get 40,000 people together, inevitably, you get a couple of really bad people. Hopefully they're not sitting right in front of you. But you get 40,000 people together, and indeed, every time there's a major league ball game or a big college game, I mean, we're in San Diego right now. San Diego State, you know, just down the street here. They have a gigantic stadium. San Diego Chargers, they have a gigantic stadium. They don't fill it up usually, but nevertheless, with good reason, nevertheless, you get 40,000 people, together, you get a couple of bad apples, right? Well, you get the whole internet together, you get a couple of bad apples, or a couple of bad bytes, I guess, or a couple of bad URLs, a couple of bad somethings. You get the whole internet together, you get a couple of bad something or others. But I think it's disingenuous, bordering on lying, when people say, oh, all the pornography, all this violent pornography, all that people watch is violent pornography. Let me tell you something. Most people, given the option of watching violent pornography, that's not what they want to watch. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but given the option, here's what comprises the overwhelming majority of internet pornography. It's people, it's adults with big smiles on their faces doing the stuff that you used to do before you got married. Or to be a little more scientific about it, it's adults having genital sex with big smiles on their faces. It's a lot of intercourse, it's a lot of oral sex, it's a little bit of the pirate game. It's adults doing friendly things with other friendly adults with big smiles on their faces. That's what the overwhelming majority of pornography is on the internet, and that's what people watch. That's what people watch. And there's a little bit of people pretending to force each other. They're not really forcing each other, because who's in pornographic videos? Actors. It's not really what's happening. They're pretending. Now, how many people have ever heard of television? Yes, television. Remember Seinfeld? Remember Seinfeld? You old enough to remember Seinfeld? You know, in real life, those people are not like those characters. They're pretending. And if you ever watch the Three Stooges, if you're old enough, if you ever watch the Three Stooges, you know that, right? Getting poked in the eyes. You know, if that really happened in real life, that guy would have been blind like dozens of movies ago. But they were just acting. And that's what's true in pornography. They're acting. Nobody's actually getting hurt. And in fact, there's a little thing along the bottom, you probably have never seen it. It says, nobody was hurt in the production of this movie, right? We have to get PETA in there. No horses were harmed in the production of this movie. So, now the question, one of the questions about pornography that we need to address squarely is about masturbation. Because most people, they don't sit around with some time on their hands, you should pardon the expression. Most people don't sit around saying, gee, I have an hour to kill. Should I watch the first half of Lawrence of Arabia, or should I watch Buttbusters 3? Let me think. Well, on the one hand, the music in Lawrence of Arabia is pretty good. And, you know, most people, they don't watch pornography unless they're masturbating. And most people, they don't sit around thinking that they're going to write the great American novel, casually put pornography on and say, oh, gee, instead of writing a novel, think I'll jack off. That's not how it happens. That's just not how it happens, right? What happens is somebody you love, who knows, maybe you, somebody says, gee, I got about 20 minutes to kill, think I'll masturbate. Ooh, what a good idea. Oh, and I know, to make it even more fun, I'll put on Buttbusters 3. Oh, no, I saw that last week. Buttbusters 4. Oh. Now, I see a lot of couples where there's conflict about pornography. And I see a lot of people coming in who are upset about their own pornography use. And the question that I have to ask, whether it's a couple or an individual, the question I have to ask very early in the therapeutic process is, well, how do you feel about the concept of somebody masturbating when they're in a long-term relationship? There's a lot of people who say, oh, no, that's not allowed. Masturbating is for horny teenagers or single losers. It's not for somebody in an actual relationship. Now, if that's how somebody feels, you can stop talking about pornography. And we have to talk about masturbation. Because if you don't think it's okay to have somebody masturbate when they're in a relationship, the question of what they're imagining or looking at while they masturbate seems kind of secondary. I mean, that's a person, if they don't think it's okay to masturbate if you're married, that's a person who would say, I don't want you reading the Bill of Rights when you masturbate during our marriage, because I don't want you masturbating if we're married. And I don't care if it's Buttbusters 3 or if it's the Bill of Rights. Personally, I think we'd all be better off if, you know, fill in the blank. So, I mean, imagine everybody masturbating to the Bill of Rights for a day. I mean, how great would that be? I mean, you'd have to be careful not to get it messy. But if someone does not think that masturbation is legitimate in a relationship, there's no point in talking about masturbation with pornography. Excuse me. So, why do some people prefer masturbation with pornography to partner sex? No ex-wife jokes here, please. So why do some people prefer masturbation with pornography to partner sex? Well, for one thing, the sex is more satisfying for some people. Obviously not for everybody, for some people. For some people, having sex with their partner is boring or frustrating or painful, or they feel lonely or they feel stupid. But when they have sex with themselves, they have a great time. So that seems to be something people don't talk very much about. You know, people blame the pornography. It wasn't for pornography, If it wasn't for pornography, you'd be having sex with your wife. That's like saying if it wasn't for ice cream, you'd be eating broccoli. You could take away all the ice cream in the world, I'm still not going to eat broccoli because I don't like it. Another reason that some people prefer masturbating with pornography is because of ongoing conflict in the couple. You know, if you and your partner have this low-grade guerrilla war going on, then having sex with that person is really not that attractive. And it doesn't have to be bad people who have a low-grade guerrilla war. It can be people who love each other, like each other, but they can't stand the other person's parenting philosophy. And so every day or two or three or four, they're having conflict about that. I can tell you as a marriage counselor, you know, most adults, they only have sex on the weekend. If you have a fight with your partner on Thursday night, forget about sex that whole week. Because it takes people 2 or 3 days to recover from the fight. By then it's Sunday night. Sorry, I got to help Bobby with a science fair project. Forget about sex for this week. Now, of course, with masturbation with pornography, there's no performance anxiety. No one ever said, gee, I hope I satisfy myself. No one ever masturbates and says to themselves, are you thinking of me or are you thinking of someone else? People have more control over the experience. They get to pick the time and the place. They don't have to do it on a schedule to match somebody else's, say, work requirements. And, you know, a lot of couples, they still, after 8 years, they still haven't agreed on what are we going to do sexually. You know, nobody does everything, right? Most people, after 6 months, they sort of narrow sex down to their favorite 3 or 4 things. Most people, not everybody. Most people narrow sex down to their favorite 3 or 4 things. And then that's the stuff that they do, whether they do it twice a week or twice a year. But some couples, you know, after 8 years together, they're still quarreling. Honey, how about a blowjob? No. Honey, how about a blowjob? No. Honey, how about a blowjob? No. And they're arguing about this like year after year after year. So eventually people say, gee, do I want to have sex with you? What? And fight again about whether or not I'm going to give you a blowjob? Forget it. And that's one of the ways that desire goes down. Because people know what to expect. Yeah, I know what's going to happen if I agree to have sex with you. We're going to have that same old thing. Honey, can I please go down on you? No. Why not? No, because I said no. So after a while, people say, you know what? Let's just forget the sex. And masturbation becomes a very nice alternative to that. And of course, with masturbation, there's no birth control to worry about. And there's no fertility conflict. So masturbating to porn can be a way to stay married. Masturbating to porn can be a strategy for staying in a couple where the sex in the couple is lousy, is missing, is frustrating, is boring, is painful. Do I think it's great to be in a relationship where the sex is those unattractive things? No, of course not. But some people, you know, they have kids, they have a house, they have a dog, they have a job, they have, did I mention kids? They have kids, they have kids. They want to stay together, you know? They want to stay together. They don't want to break up the marriage just because the sex is missing or terrible. And so they turn to masturbating to porn. Is it ideal? No. But the alternative of abandoning your kids or leaving your kids or getting a divorce when you've been with somebody for 28 years, the alternative to masturbating without porn is not going to be ideal either. Not going to be ideal either. Masturbating to porn can also be a good strategy for avoiding an affair or avoiding going to a sex worker. You know, some people, they're in a relationship where they have sex once or twice a year. Lots of perfectly nice people, some of them presumably here. They have sex with their partner once or twice a year. They want to have sex once or twice a month. What are they supposed to do? Some people masturbate. Some people have an affair. Some people go to a massage parlor and get a happy ending. Of that selection of choices, masturbating to porn may seem like the most innocuous strategy. So I call this the porn panic that America's going through, the idea that porn is, you know, destroying Western civilization, the porn panic. These are all myths. These are all myths, that all porn is violent or anti-woman. This anti-woman thing is so interesting, and I don't want to spend the next 3 hours talking about that. But I've spoken to people who are against pornography, and they say it's anti-woman. I say, give me an example. And they say, well, there's a woman with 2 men, and she's only there for their pleasure. Of course, she has a big smile on her face, but we'll put that aside for a second. So I say, okay, what about porn where there's 2 women and 1 man? Well, that's exploitive because each woman doesn't have a man of her own. They're both involved with it. So I say, well, what about porn with 2 women? And I'm told, well, that's for the male gaze, and so that's anti-woman. And I say, well, what about porn with 2 men? And I'm told, well, don't change the subject. So, and just in case anybody tries to persuade you that adult porn is a gateway drug to child porn, good news, it's not true. Think about it for a second. Say that you make pornography for a living. Let's just say. It could happen. Let's say that you make pornography for a living. That means that you wouldn't be here because you'd be in your office counting your money. People who make porn are making money so fast that they can't even count it fast enough. So imagine that you're making a legal product, adult pornography. Imagine you're making a legal product. You're making money hand over fist. You're making money so fast you can't count it because you're making a legal product. And it looks like good times are here to stay. And then somebody at the board meeting says, I have a great idea. Now that we are awash in all this cash, now that we have really made it professionally, we're making a lot of money, we're doing this great thing for, in corporate land, here's what we should do. We should add a new product line. We should start manufacturing this thing that is illegal and that is so reviled by the public that if we get caught and we go to jail, the other prisoners will rape us. That's how much people look down on child porn. That the prisoners, the people who are in jail for murder, they rape the people who are in jail for making child porn. That's how much people look down in Western society on child porn. So imagine a board of directors of a corporation saying, well, now that we're making tons of money making a legal product, that's a great idea. Let's make this illegal product that could get us all 1,000 years in jail apiece. What a great idea. Does anybody think that makes any sense at all? Because I don't think it makes any sense at all. And indeed, in the real world, people who make adult porn simply don't make child porn. They're way too smart for that. Way, way, way too smart. Besides, the market for adult porn is multiple magnitudes bigger than the market for child porn. So it just doesn't make any sense. So if anybody tells you that adult porn is a gay, people say, well, you know, people get bored with adult porn and then they start looking at child porn. To which I say, when people say this to me, to which I say, forgive me for this, to which I say, tell me exactly under what circumstances you would be willing to look at a film of an 8-year-old getting his penis sucked. No? Correct. There is no circumstance under which people who are not interested in that are going to get interested in that. Certainly not looking at pictures of adults having sex. So we've got some porn panic myths that we need to have answers to. The idea that people who look at porn, they don't care about their partner, demonstrably not true. Unfortunately, people are not standing up and saying, I watch porn and I vote. You know, that's what we need. Bumper stickers. Bumper stickers. I watch porn and I vote. That's what, I watch porn and I heart my wife. You know? That's what we need. That's what we need. And for people, now this is my other slide that I made with my own 2 hands, so please appreciate it. For people who say that pornography leads to all these social evils like sexual violence and all of that, now this is data from my favorite source of data. This is data from the FBI, and I always quote the FBI when I can. This is a graph that starts in 2000, the year 2000, and goes to the year 2012. So it's pretty recent data, right? I love talking to a group that knows what data is, for God's sake. You know, I speak to a lot of people who say data. Oh, that's the plural of dates, right? So, in the year 2000, broadband came to America, and the American home was suddenly flooded with pornography. America was flooded with free, high-quality pornography in the year 2000. Wow, is that snazzy. Now, what happened to the rate of sexual assault since the year 2000 when America was flooded with internet pornography? Well, what the FBI says is that the rate of sexual assault has gone down. The rate of divorce has gone down. The rate of suicide has gone down. And the rate of child sexual exploitation has gone down since the year 2000. And lest you think that this is idiosyncratic to America, these data have been duplicated in countries around the world. And not just countries like us, like Canada. The Czech Republic, Germany, Denmark. Too Western for you? Japan, Korea. Wherever the availability of porn goes up, the incidence of sexual violence goes down. I'm not saying that there's a causal relationship. We're all way too hip for that. But we can notice the correlation. We can notice the correlation. What we can notice is that as pornography increased dramatically in this country, the rates of sexual violence did not go up, and the rates of child molestation did not go up, and the rates of suicide and divorce did not go up. Very interesting. Very interesting. So there are some unfortunate lessons that people get from porn. Some people get the idea that women like rough sex, and some do, but many don't. Some people get the idea that men like rough sex, and some do, and many don't. So people get lots of some unfortunate lessons from porn, but people get positive lessons from porn as well. When you look at porn, what you mostly see is happy people. You see a lot of happy ladies with their legs open, getting licked. Yes, you do. Yes. I mean it. I mean it. They wide open, big smile. Big smile. Another lesson that people get from porn is that it's okay to touch yourself during sex. Oh, that changes your life. When you can touch your own penis or your own vulva during sex, changes your life. Suddenly, there's more opportunities, more hands in the room, changes everything. Changes everything. Another thing people learn from porn is that pregnant women can be sexual and enjoy sex. Another lesson people learn from porn, remember I told you the clitoris was invented in what year? 81, that's right. So the clitoris has a big role, you should pardon the expression, in pornography. And people learn that older men and women can be sexual too. So there's a lot to be said for what people learn from porn. What we need is for people, especially young people, to develop porn literacy so they know how to decode the images that they see in pornography. They need to learn that pornography is not a documentary. It's more like a highlight reel. So what other things do we have? Things that humanists need to know about sex. Well, I think, I feel quite certain that the similarities around male and female sexuality are more important than the differences. Now, I'm not talking about 15-year-olds, I'm talking about grown-ups. The similarities in male and female sexuality are more important than the differences. Now, let's talk about height for a second. If we lined up all the women in the room, which of course is not a bad idea, if we lined up all the women in the room, according to height, we have the shorter women on the left and the taller women on the right, and we'd arrange them according to height, and the shortest woman would probably be about 4'11", right? And the tallest woman probably be about 6 feet tall, right? And then if we lined up all the men in the room, yeah, we got to do that too. We lined up all the men in the room according to height. Well, the shortest man would probably not be so short as 4'11", maybe like 5'1", and the tallest man would be way taller than 6 feet. You know, the tallest man probably be about 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". So if you look at the chart here, there'd be some women who were so short that they wouldn't be men, and there'd be some men who'd be so tall that they wouldn't be women. But most of the women and most of the men, there would be people of the same height. You know, if I tell you that somebody in that group is 5'5", you don't know if it's a man or a woman. If I tell you that somebody is 5'9", you don't know if it's a man or a woman. Now we could say the average man is taller than the average woman. That's true. But that doesn't tell us anything about a particular person. Let me put it another way. If you take this man and this woman and you put them in a closet, I mean, it's your option, but you take this man and this woman and you put them in a closet together and you say, well, tell me about the average person in that closet. The average person in that closet has one ovary and one testicle, which is statistically accurate but completely meaningless. You can come out of the closet now. So this is the same thing with every aspect of sexuality. If I tell you that I know someone who likes to have sex twice a week, is it a man or a woman? You don't know. Even though we know that the average man wants sex a little bit more than the average woman of the same age. or the average man masturbates a little bit more than the average woman of the same age. But if I tell you I know somebody who masturbates 3 times a week, you have no idea if it's a man or a woman. So we don't need to be talking about the average man or the average woman. What we need to be talking about is what do people want when it comes to sex. Both men and women, gay, straight, bi, trans, it doesn't matter. People want pleasure and closeness. They want to feel safe. They want to feel special. They want to feel adequate. They don't want to feel anxious. They want to feel that they have the option of exploring the erotic world. And both genders feel anxious about the exact same stuff. I want to be attractive. I want to feel like my performance is good. I don't endorse this position, but that's how men and women feel, that sex is a performance. Both genders are anxious about having sexual problems and that they want to feel good about themselves and good about their bodies. And both genders are dealing with cultural messages about what kind of sex is okay, what kind of sex is not okay. And both genders believe that in this concept of the opposite sex. I hate that expression, the opposite sex. I don't know what's the opposite to a man, but it's not a woman. What? A pineapple or a bicycle or, I don't know, a electric typewriter. I don't know what the opposite of a man is. But the thing that is most like a man on this earth is a woman. And the thing that is most like women on this earth, it's not starfish, it's man. Right? So they're not opposites and they're not others. And this whole idea that we need sex education that separates the genders, that's just crazy. You know, men need to know about the clitoris too, especially since 1981. So my patients come in and they say, listen, doc, you got to help me understand men better. And I say, why? And they say, well, because I can't figure out what George likes. And I say, well, unless you're planning to have sex with all men, if you're only going to have sex with George, you want to talk to the world's expert on George, and it's not me. Go talk to George and find out what he likes. People find me repulsive. Number nine, normal sex and real sex are dangerous ideas. They're dangerous ideas. Normal sex, what does that mean? Sex that's common? What does that mean, normal sex and real sex? They're dangerous ideas. They're strictly an expression of arbitrary social norms. It used to be that women who wanted oral sex were considered sick. It used to be that homosexuality was considered sick. It used to be that anybody who wanted sex, any woman who wanted sex after menopause, there was something wrong with her. I was lecturing at the medical school in Morocco a few years ago, and during the break somebody came up to me and said, there must be a problem with translation here, because I could swear that you were talking about women having sex when they're 55 years old. And I said, yeah, I was. And I said, well, why would a woman want sex when she can't have children anymore? So ideas about normal sex are completely cultural bound, both for us as well as for the religious right. And we need to keep that in mind. The whole idea of normality is culturally bound. We can talk about sex that expresses certain values, and we can talk about sex that does not express certain values, but that's very different from what's normal. And okay, this is the kind of therapy I do. It's up to you, Charles. Either you quit lying to me about your relationship with your mother or the puppy buys the piano. You'd be surprised how fast therapy goes when you do it like this. So everybody's always asking me about normal sex, and I'm so, I really don't want to talk about normal sex. And every Valentine's Day, USA Today calls me, what's normal sex? And my patients want to know what's normal sex. And they think they mean which behaviors, is having sex with the lights off, is that normal? Is newlyweds having sex only twice a week? Is that normal? So I don't talk about that behavioral stuff. You want to know what's normal, if you really push me, what's normal sex is adults in America mostly have sex when they're tired. That's normal. That's normal. And that has huge implications, right? That has huge implications for things. Most adults in America have sex when they're tired. A lot of adults have sex when they are not sober. A lot of adults in America have never had sex sober, and that has big implications too. They started having sex in high school drinking beer. In college, they were having sex after 3 or 4 Cosmos. and now they're having sex when they're loaded still. So when people tell me they're having sexual difficulties, I want to know, by the way, are you sober when you have sex? And a lot of people feel awkward and self-conscious during sex. It's so interesting. It's such an obvious thing to say that most people say, why are you saying that? So I'll tell you. You could have a couple, they've been together 9 years. They know the most intimate details of each other's bowel habits. But to talk about, you know, honey, when you go down on me, a little less teeth, that would be great. They won't talk about that. Or to say, you know, to be perfectly honest, you know how my shoulder hurts? You know, if you would get on my other side when we have sex, that would be a lot better. A lot of people just won't say that. And that's really remarkable when you think about it. So that leads us to our 10th thing, and since I only have 3 minutes left, how perfect is that? And that is the question of, what do most people want from sex? What do most people want from sex? And the answer is some combination of pleasure and closeness. Some people want more of one, some people want more of the other. But that's what people want from sex, some combination of pleasure and closeness. Now you would think if that's what people want from sex, that's what they would focus on during sex. But it isn't, because people are such perverse creatures. So what do people focus on during sex? If they're not focusing on pleasure and closeness? What they're focusing on is, how do I look? How do I smell? Is my butt too big? I hope I get it up. I hope I keep it up. I hope I don't come too quickly. I hope I can finally persuade my partner to lick me there. I wonder what my partner is thinking. I hope that my partner is having a good time. Gee, I wish I didn't have that report due tomorrow morning. And there are people who will not have sex in their favorite position because they don't like the way it makes their body look. Like some women, they like to have sex on their hands and knees, you know, with the guy behind them, but they don't like that it makes their big hairy butt show. So they forego their favorite position. Some women, they like to sit on a partner, but they think that their breasts sag, you know. Now let me tell you something about women's breasts. As women get older, breasts do not sag, they relax. So what I've tried to portray today is that sex is more than just an activity. Sex is an idea. And it's the ideas about sexuality that we want to think more about. We want to think about their implications in our own personal lives, as well as the implications for public policy. And I'll be around all weekend if you want to talk to me. A lot of these ideas are in my various books. But just to underline the importance of communication when it comes to sex, I want you to look at this. She says, no, I said I've got acute angina. Thank you very much.